Hello, Dave Hopewell from Gwynedd Archaeological Trust here again. This is the fifth and last short informal lecture that I'm doing looking at the Gwynedd Archaeological Trust's work on the Romans in northwest Wales. Previous lectures we've kind of looked at things very much from the Roman perspective, I think. They left very visible sites in the landscape, and this was, after all, a series of projects looking at the Roman archaeology of northwest Wales. The final site we're going to look at brings us back somewhat to the interaction between the Romans and the people of Wales at the time. Before the Romans arrived, we sort of talked about this in the first lecture. People were living in roundhouse settlements and were largely farming communities. So I think the site we're going to look at today it tells us some things about the interaction between the Romans and the people of Wales at the time. In the south of England, people were definitely, in the southeast particularly, people were definitely taking up Roman customs, Roman building styles. Not everybody, but that was seen to be quite a sort of settled zone where people were interacting with the Romans, and in the later years of the occupation, it appears to be reasonably peaceful. Tacitus had something to say about this as well. This is from Agricola, and he wrote, "And so the population was gradually led into the demoralising temptation of arcades, baths, and sumptuous banquets. The unsuspecting Briton spoke of such novelties as civilization, when in fact they were only a feature of their enslavement." The people of North Wales didn't really go in for that. They were definitely under the thumb of the Romans, but they didn't seem to take up Roman customs to a great extent. So this is a typical plan of a Romano-British settlement. This is Bryn Area. One thing that we did find in these kind of excavations, that although they're not taking up a lot of the Roman customs, there was trade going on between the native population and the Romans. So within roundhouse settlements like this and other ones on Anglesey, we tend to find quite a lot of high quality Roman pottery, for instance, Roman coins. So stuff was being traded between the Romans and the local population. So this was perhaps one of the bigger changes that the Romans brought in their long occupation. We're looking at a site called Tai Cochion. This is simply named after the nearest house to where we started work. It was grant aided by Cadw. Again, this is part of the scheduling enhancement programme with some additional funds from the Anglesey AONB. The reason we started working on this site was from the Portable Antiquities Scheme. Local responsible metal detectorist who had great interest in the history of the area brought in loads of stuff from some fields around a place called Tai Cochion, and said people had been metal detecting there for quite a while, and lots of interesting material had come up, mostly Roman. And we looked at things that were published in Archaeologia Cambrensis in the 19th century, and they were finding Roman material back then as well. So there's obviously a lot of stuff coming from these fields, and it was not entirely clear whether this was a rich native settlement or something different. So we got out our trusty fluxgate gradiometer and carried out a geophysical survey over the area where they had been finding the Roman material. And lo and behold, there was a lot going on in the fields. So this is adjacent to Tai Cochion house. So this was the first bit we tried, see if anything came up. If I was looking at this and I hadn't got loads of Roman finds from it, I would have said this was a medieval settlement. Something very peculiar going on here for what we normally see in this area. We have quite clearly a road along the middle of it with lots of sort of rectangular fields and paddocks to either side. And if you look really closely, I think you can start seeing that there are some rectangular buildings within these fields. I rather thought that the road was just going to follow the modern road down to the edge of the Menai Strait, but no, it carried on across the fields, the next set of fields, in the land of belonging to Trefarthen, and we can see even more clearly here these rectangular fields and paddocks with buildings in. This is useful. It's worth looking at my interpretation of it. It makes it a bit easier to see, so we can see the first part again there with the road running through the middle, and the second part with paddocks and lots of buildings. So we've got at least 20 buildings in there, and a field system and all kinds of stuff. So very interesting, and not the kind of thing you normally find in North Wales, shall we say. This is zooming in on one of these particular areas. You can see particularly a really nice square small field with a rectangular building in the corner, in this just below the centre, and a very wide looking Roman road. Well, I presume it's Roman at this point, but yes, a Roman road. Possibly mean wide Roman roads were quite often centres where people were setting up trading and markets, so possibly. Overall, it's a huge area. A lot's going on. So we're looking at fields, flat fields by the edge of the Menai Strait. We're almost opposite Carnarvon, so almost opposite Saguntium. We've got a road running through the middle of this settlement with, as we were looking at earlier, these rectangular buildings, and then just in the fields at the end, where we were looking for the end of the Roman road, we've got a fairly typical Iron Age native settlement, roundhouse settlement with a double-ditched enclosure around it. No idea whether this was even vaguely contemporary. It might have been. It would be very interesting if we found that this was actually occupied at the same time as this very Roman-looking settlement. So the next thing was to have a try and sort of ground truth our geophysical survey results. I'd interpreted everything as I could see it, but until you actually have a look in the ground, you can't be entirely sure whether correct. So we did 2 seasons of excavation, a few weeks for each one. The first one was quite a short amount of time, and we looked at this area here, which had what looked like a rectangular building, a boundary ditch, the Roman road, and a few other little odds and ends. Quite a strong anomaly from the rectangular building. So we cleared the topsoil off in our usual gentle fashion and uncovered a rather unsettlingly large area to excavate in 3 weeks or so, but we weren't aiming to excavate absolutely everything. We were aiming just to have a look and see what was going on here hopefully without disturbing the archaeology too much. So this was run as a community excavation, so we got a lot of people involved in it, so we were training people and as I say, community excavation. This is an aerial view of it. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I think perhaps the second excavation is going to be slightly more interesting since we're quite short of time. But what we got here was a large rectangular building. You can see it's the sort of rectangular brown stain in the middle of the excavation area. It appears to have been burnt down at some point. it looks like the walls were made of wattle and daub on a stone foundation, and yeah, it's definitely Roman. In fact, I think my interpretation of the geophysics was pretty good. Fortunately, we did get a boundary ditch as we thought, where we thought we should, and a Roman road, and various other features that we could see on the geophysics. So I was quite happy with that, and that makes it easier to interpret the rest of the survey. And yeah, here's our typical Roman road. This will look quite familiar if you watch the lecture on Roman roads. So the second year of excavation, we got another team of volunteers coming to work for us, and opened up a bigger area and had a bit longer time to look at this area. This one is down quite close to the Menai Strait. We opened up 2 trenches, well actually a third one that we allowed school children to do a bit of training excavation in. But one of these was over what looked like a large rectangular building, and the other one was over a slightly enigmatic feature that we couldn't quite work out what it was, thought it might be industrial. So here's our aerial photograph. The trench on the right at the top was the one for the school kids, and then next to that we've got the one where we had this enigmatic feature. I'm not going to talk too much about this. It turned out it wasn't really, well, it was very enigmatic, but it wasn't one single feature. It was a series of large intercutting pits. They're mostly quite shallow. We're not entirely sure what their function was, so I'm not going to discuss that too much. There was a corn drying kiln in there, which was quite nicely preserved. In the other trench, we had a large rectangular building. We stripped off quite a small amount of topsoil from this trench. Some of the stones of the building were actually poking through to the surface, so it's not very far below the ground, and it's quite surprising it survived as well as it did, it being in agricultural ground. This is our trench, and you can see the outline. This is early on in the excavation. You can see the outline of this large rectangular house or building, as we didn't really know what it was at that point. You can see that particularly on the right hand side you've got a line of stones which are the foundations of the wall. That carries on around to the other side. The other side's a bit more complicated. The whole thing had been filled up with small stones, which was after its abandonment, so that's mostly what we're looking at here. We managed to do, we excavated the majority of the building, so after removing the stones we can see that they were sitting directly on, in this case, a bit of flagged floor, and after a bit more work this is pretty much what we came down to. Slightly sunken floor, clay in some places, cobbles, small cobbles, flagged in other places. This is a view of it without lots of people in it, so you can get a bit more of an idea of it. You can see there's a large entrance on the left hand side about halfway down the building, and the whole thing was filled with this sort of this very dark grey material, soil basically, with lots of charcoal in it, lots of Roman pottery. We thought, well, this is going to be great for dating, but it wasn't until at the end of the excavation, when we tried to and get some kind of sequence there, we found that the majority of these grey deposits in the interior contained pottery going all the way back from the beginning of the 2nd century right through to the mid 4th century, which is a kind of a weird thing. It's unlikely you would get hundreds of years of pottery in one deposit. So it appears that what I think that grey material is a very mixed up, trampled layer of a mixture of all the different layers that were actually in the building. The building may have been used as something like a pigsty or something like that. So the interior has been trampled by animals or something like that. The material in interior, very interesting. This bit here not particularly clear to see, but you can see these lumps of red material in the ground. So this was the remains of the walls of the building. It was made of wattle and daub, and this building also was destroyed by fire, or partially destroyed by fire at least, and it got very hot. So the clay of the wattle and daub wall had become fired, and you could still see where the impressions of the withes used to make the wattle and daub wall. There was some surviving floor near the entrance, and in one place we could actually see a very nice sequence. So everything hadn't been totally mixed up. So this was the kind of thing that could actually give us dating evidence. So what we've got here is a really nice sequence. So we've got the phase 1 floor, which was made up of these little pebbles. Then we've got burnt material from the time that the building was severely damaged by fire. And then instead of clearing all that up, they put a paved floor over the top of it. So this sequence here gave us an idea of the dating of the building. A slightly worn coin of Sabina, wife of Hadrian, dating from AD 128 to 138, was recovered from that first floor, the gravelly, stony floor surface. From the pottery and and other finds, it looks like the building burnt down sometime around, or was very severely damaged sometime around AD 275. Then, as we could see, a new floor was laid over the burnt remains, and the building probably continued in use till about AD 350. So a very long-lived building, possibly with several different uses. We can see that in many places we had a clay floor that was severely heat affected, and here we have the very wide and impressive entrance halfway down the side of the building that faced the sea. Just to get your orientation, you can see an area, the sort of rectangular area of gravel in the front there, which is the entrance. So we've got a wide entrance, and the stones to either side of it would have meant it was probably a covered entrance, and there was also a veranda along the front of this side of the house. I don't know I'm not quite sure how far it extended, but it seemed to be very clear on this side of the house. So here's a plan of the building. This is the opposite way around to the last photograph. You can see the wide entrance there, the veranda, flagged floor, and then there were quite a lot of features inside the building, which we'll come to in a minute, and there was a door at the back. This is a shot of the clay floor in one side of the building. You can see there's all kinds of scorch marks on the floor. Some of it appears to be from when the building was burnt down, but it also looks like we probably had braziers or something going on, something on the floor here. You can see all kinds of patterns from the occupation. Yeah, we found quite a number of features set into the floor of the building, possibly they appear to be from the later use of the building. So this is a hearth or oven under excavation, so it's got stone bottoms and stone lining, and it looks like it had clay over the top. This is it excavated with a raking out hole on the left-hand side there. We also found quite a number of querns. They didn't appear to have been in situ. They appear to have been reused in the floor as working surfaces, so it's quite a good example. There was, on this one, actually had another one leaning up behind it. I think it was this one. Other areas we found this is an area of burnt material with lots of little stake holes underneath it. So it's a working area of some kind. This was interesting because when we cleaned it up like this, and then after it had rained, you could see what the burnt material was, and it was these little grains of carbonized spelt wheat. So this looks like there had been a basket or a bag of wheat on the floor when the building was burnt down. This had all got burnt and was preserved. So we've got like a big bag of this stuff, and it actually kind of brings it home brings you closer to the inhabitants somehow, seeing this sort of detailed evidence for what was going on in there. This was, when analysed, some of this was partly sprouted. They're not quite sure whether it was just hadn't been kept very well, or whether they were actually deliberately doing that and they were making beer. Other things that we could see on that we found on the floor. This was a pot in a little hollow on the ground, so it was in a pot stand to stop it from falling over. A stone had fallen off the wall when the building collapsed and landed on top of it, so when we lifted up the stone, the pot was underneath it. That's kind of I think it was probably a storage jar. That, and other places we could see little hearths with rings of stake holes around it. This is that corner of the building from aerial photographs taken from a pole cam. You can see the back door just to the right at the bottom there. So that's the wall of the building, and just beside the back door there we could see this, which is a slightly mysterious at the time structure. I think it's probably a bench. So it's made of, we've got all these edge set limestone slabs, and it probably had more slabs or wood on the top of it. So this is a fairly typical thing that you might find in this type of Roman style house. We had lots of finds, as you would expect on a Roman site. We've probably had more finds from this site than have been found for the rest of Anglesey from the Roman period. 2,730 finds from the 2012 dig alone. This is Sarah who processed them. This is the kind of thing we were finding. This is a black burnished ware vessel made in Dorset. This is part of a mortarium, so this was a big flat dish with grits set into the bottom that was used for grinding up food. Lots of high quality tableware. This is Samian ware from Gaul. A particular nice bit here, we found two pieces of the base of this vessel in different parts of the site, but when we could put them together and we could see the stamp of the maker, who was Lupercus, a pottery at Rheinshaben between AD 140 and 160. So this is the kind of thing that we need for our dating evidence, so very useful to see all this kind of stuff. Coins, there were quite a lot of coins cropped up. This was the earliest one from the reign of Trajan. I think this probably predated the settlement. It's quite worn, so I suspect it had been kicking around in somebody's bag or pocket for a while. The last one is a telling coin, and if we're getting too fond of the Romans, perhaps we should have a look at this one. This is the latest find from the site. It's from the reign of Constantius II, and it says it's difficult to see exactly what's going on the right hand, on the side shown on the right hand side here. It looks a bit like a praying mantis, but it's not. It's a Roman soldier spearing to death a barbarian, and it says around the edge of it, fel temp reparatio, or which gets translated as restoration of happy times. Nice guys. We found there was a lot of other finds came up. I'm not going to go into this into too much detail. They're all in Ynys Môn now. Some of them have been displayed in temporary exhibitions. Hopefully we'll see a few more of them as time goes on. This was probably the weirdest one that we found. It's a brooch, a small brooch about so big. I wasn't even convinced it was Roman to start off with, but the National Museum seemed quite happy with it. It's obviously a fish with some kind of bird-like head. It even appears to have a hat on it. I haven't really been able to work out exactly what it is. One suggestion was that if somebody described to you what a dolphin looked like, and you'd never seen one, and you made a brooch from their description, this is what it would look like. I don't know. It may refer to some long-lost legend from Roman times as well. More mundane, a snaffle bit for so we found quite a few horse fittings. This is a bronze furniture fitting, so it's more like a handle or something you would find on furniture, possibly on a bed. So it's a quick lecture this, so I better get finished. Our summary of what was going on was we had a phase one, a building in first occupation circa about 140 AD, destruction by fire around 275, reuse of the building after that, and then abandonment and infilling with the last material about 350. So it was a long-lived. I think this survived for much of the life of the settlement. This seems to be mirrored from finds we've got elsewhere on it. So it looks like the settlement was used for 200 years. Many generations lived in this settlement. So what does it all mean? What does it mean? It's a Romanised settlement. This is very different to everything else we've seen on Anglesey and most of the western seaboard of Britain. So this was really a first. We've got rectangular buildings now. That house that we excavated is a very typical Roman house, not quite a villa. I think we would call it a courtyard house, and we'd look at this as being a small town or large village. There's plenty of examples of these in the southwest of England, but this is the first time we've seen anything like this in North Wales. It seems to be pretty clear that it was a trading settlement. The pottery that came from the house or building appeared to be some of it was domestic, but it also appeared to be what you would expect to find as trade goods. So this makes sense. I'm thinking it might possibly have taken over some of the functions of the vicus to do or settlement at Saguntium. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's clearly linked to Saguntium. So this is the ferry landing point from Saguntium Roman Fort to Carnarvon, and might be the start of the road across Anglesey. It's interesting to see this one in its sort of wider context. It's a civilian settlement with little or no defences and lots of goods, basically. So quite a rich settlement. So this really does suggest that from the early to mid 2nd century, we're looking at quite settled politically, with the Romans getting on with, but the people of North Wales then, and the ancestors of a lot of the modern population. It has been suggested in the past that you could split Britain quite clearly into a militarised zone in the Roman period in the north and the west, and a Romanised area in the southeast, which is reasonable in some ways. Sometimes called a landscape of resistance and landscape of opportunity. Clearly, we're not looking at that all the way through the Roman period. What we're seeing, Tai Cochion really shows us that the Romans were trading and administrators to some extent. I mean, obviously the people were still under Roman rule, but there were not lots of Roman soldiers all over the place. It looks like they were trading and collecting taxes. Martin Millet's described, instead of a landscape of resistance, as a landscape of mutual indifference, which I think is quite good. It looks like the local population traded and did what they had to do with the Romans, but didn't take up Roman customs to anything like the extent of what you're seeing elsewhere in southeast of Britain anyway. One thing that is worth bearing in mind as well when we're looking at this is we haven't found everything that we're going to find, and stuff is coming up all the time that's changing our perception of what was going on in the Roman period or Romano-British period in North Wales. A recent discovery by Toby Driver down in not far from Aberystwyth of a villa, a Roman villa, which is another thing that you're not normally expecting to find in North Wales, suggests that there are some interesting anomalies in Romano, British and Roman North Wales, and that there was some Romanisation going on of the local population or people settling from the forts or whatever. So yes, it's an interesting subject, and interesting to see what comes up in the near future, or the distant future for that matter. If you want to read more about this, I think I've already spent far too long on this lecture. It was published in Archaeologia Cambrensis in 2016, a Roman settlement at Tai Cochion, Llanidan on Anglesey. This has got lots of detail in it, and descriptions of all, and catalogues of all the finds and all that kind of stuff. So very an interesting read. The site, people always ask what happens to these sites when we've finished. It was a farmer's field, and still is a farmer's field, so we put some geotextile over the interior of the building, and it's all been filled back in again and is now a field again. It's just off the coastal path, you can almost walk across the top of it. There we go. I think that's me coming to the end of our lectures on the Romans in North West Wales and the work that the Trust has done there. Hopefully we'll have some lectures on other subjects coming up. But for now, thanks for watching and goodbye.